The murder of Jodi Jones in 2003 is one of the most controversial cases in Scottish legal history. Her boyfriend, Luke Mitchell, was convicted of the crime, but over the years, doubts have emerged regarding the integrity of the investigation and the fairness of the trial. Many believe that Mitchell may have been wrongly convicted, partly due to the failure of the police to thoroughly investigate other potential suspects. So sit down, grab yourself a mocha, as we dive into the case of Jodi Jones. On the evening of June 30th, 2003, 14-year-old Jodi Jones was reported missing after she failed to return home from meeting her boyfriend, Luke Mitchell. Jodi was last seen around 5 p.m. when she left her house in East Houses, Dalkeith. When she did not come back, her family grew increasingly worried, and by 10:30 p.m, they organised a small search party. This group included her sister, her sister's boyfriend Stephen Kelly, her boyfriend of 5 months, Luke Mitchell, and Jodi's nan. As they searched the area, Luke led the group along a wooded path near Rowan's Dyke, where he discovered Jodi's brutally murdered body hidden behind a wall. The horrific scene was immediately reported to the police, marking the beginning of a case that would deeply impact the community. From the moment Jodi Jones's body was discovered, Luke Mitchell was treated as a suspect, creating an atmosphere of suspicion that would follow him throughout the investigation. After the grim discovery, he was separated from the other members of the search party and instructed not to interact with them.
It was obvious from the police treatment of me that I was a suspect from day one. I was told to sit separately from the rest of the members of the search party. And one of them had tried to hand me a cigarette when we were sitting waiting. And they were told that they shouldn't be having any interactions with me, yet the other three were sat together, all talking together, and I was kept separate. I mean, this was genuinely from the very first moment that police had arrived that I was being treated separately.
The police then took his clothes for analysis, believing they could find evidence connecting him to the crime, and they scraped onto his fingernails for potential forensic material. Notably, Luke had dirt under his nails and his hair appeared unkempt. Despite this, police suggested that he had showered and cleaned up before joining the search for Jodi, a claim that seemed unlikely given the visible dirt on him. Furthermore, a thorough investigation of his home revealed no blood on the taps of the shower or on the door handles, casting further doubt on the police narrative. The absence of any forensic evidence linking him to the scene of the crime stood in stark contrast to the heavy suspicion placed upon him. Luke Mitchell was subjected to intense scrutiny and vilification by the local community, the media, and the police. Almost immediately after Jodi Jones's murder, rumours began to circulate, and Luke, as her boyfriend and the one who discovered her body, became the prime suspect in the public's eye. The police quickly focused their investigation on Luke, and likely leaked his name to the press, fueling a media frenzy that portrayed him as a dark, troubled teenager obsessed with violent imagery. Sensationalized reports depicted him as a devil worshipper and a fan of Marilyn Manson, drawing tenuous connections between his interests and the gruesome nature of the crime. This portrayal, combined with the community's fear and anger over the brutal murder, led to Luke being ostracized, with many in the local area convinced of his guilt even before any formal charges were brought against him. Luke was forbidden from Jodi's funeral due to the ongoing media frenzy that was surrounding him. Her family did not want the ceremony to turn into a circus. On the day of her funeral, Luke and his mother held a private vigil inside their home, which Sky News attended after a reporter for the network knocked on the door and asked if they could film. Luke's mother thought it would be a good idea, as the ongoing theme in the headlines at the time was that Luke was emotionless, cold-hearted, and didn't care about Jodi. She thought allowing Sky News to film them at this time would prove this to be untrue. However, the reporter proceeded to ambush Luke with questions during the vigil and turned it into an exclusive interview.
What would you say to those who would look at you and think he killed his girlfriend?
I just saying they're being naive, not to believe everything you read in the papers. It's trial by media, the police and accusations and things I couldn't care about. It was just want to find out what happened and who did it.
The next day, the headlines turned on him again. Luke Mitchell endured aggressive and often questionable treatment by the police, who quickly became convinced of his guilt in Jodi Jones's murder. Despite being only 15 years old, Luke was interrogated multiple times without legal counsel, which violated his rights as a minor.
The police were becoming increasingly aggressive in an attempt to physically intimidate me. I requested to go to the toilet. I was taken to the toilet and I was standing at the urinal with two very large adult males shouting at me that I was just to confess, you little bastard. Just tell us what you did and we'll make it okay.
The police conducted 3 extensive searches of his home, hoping to uncover forensic evidence that could link him to the crime, but none was found. The police developed a theory that Luke had attempted to mimic the infamous Black Dahlia case, as they believed his interest in Marilyn Manson, who had created a painting based on that case, might have inspired him. However, after thoroughly combing through every computer and device Luke had access to, the police found no evidence that he'd ever seen the painting or had any specific knowledge of the Black Dahlia murder. Despite this lack of evidence, the police's theory gained traction, leading to a narrative that painted Luke as a disturbed teenager who committed a brutal murder as part of his sinister obsession. The police overlooked standard investigative processes, such as considering alternative suspects or following other leads, in their rush to build a case against Luke. This narrow focus was compounded by leaks to the press, which sparked a media frenzy. Luke was subjected to a trial by media, where he was portrayed as a monster long before he ever saw the inside of a courtroom. This intense media scrutiny, coupled with the police's biased investigation, created a high-tension environment that would heavily influence public opinion and the eventual trial.
Other than me being a convenient suspect because I was seen as out of the ordinary and into alternative styles and lifestyles and dress sense and music, I don't know why they went after me like this. It's not as though I had criminal involvement with the police beforehand, before any of this. I was the local weirdo. It was easy to put it on me. It was easy to make people believe these nasty and evil things about me.
The prosecution's case against Mitchell was built largely on circumstantial evidence. Key points included the fact that Mitchell found Jodi's body and his interest in the music of Marilyn Manson, whose lyrics were argued to have influenced the crime. During the investigation, everyone who was a part of the initial search party with Luke had similar statements about how Luke had come across the body. They all detailed how Luke's dog, an Alsatian, started sniffing the air and her ears perked up, which is how Luke knew to go over the wall, as that is where the dog had indicated something was wrong. However, by the time it came to trial, the story had changed. Not just by one witness, but by every person that was included in the search party. The details had changed in the exact same way too. Instead of Luke's dog indicating where to go, the narrative changed to Luke knowing where Jodi was and leading the group to her body, as if he knew where he left it earlier in the evening. Luke's defense highlighted this in court to the jury. The prosecution relied heavily on the testimony of a key witness, Andrina Bryson, who claimed to have seen Jodi Jones with a boy on the path leading down to the crime scene shortly before Jodi was murdered. Bryson stated that the two appeared to be arguing as they walked along the secluded route. Her testimony was critical because it suggested that Luke was with Jodi just before the crime occurred. However, Bryson's view of the scene was limited. She was driving past at approximately 30 miles an hour when she claimed to have observed them. During the investigation, Andrina Bryson was shown a photo lineup and identified Luke Mitchell as the boy she had seen with Jodi that evening, which significantly bolstered the prosecution's case. Yet, when called to testify in court, her confidence wavered. On the witness stand, she was unable to definitively identify Luke Mitchell as the person she had seen on the path with Jodi. This inconsistency raised serious concerns about the reliability of her testimony, particularly given the speed at which she was driving and the fleeting nature of her observation. Despite her inability to confirm her earlier identification in court, Bryson's initial selection of Luke from the lineup played a crucial role in shaping the jury's perception of his involvement in the crime.
That was a big moment for me. At the very least, I thought, well, that's, a massive hole in the Crown's case. Here's somebody who's actually willing to stand up and say, no, this is not the person. It takes a lot of guts to stand up there and, go against the grain and say, actually, no, this is wrong.
Luke Mitchell's mother faced intense scrutiny during the investigation, as she was his primary alibi. She claimed that on the night of Jodi's murder, Luke was at home with his older brother and her cooking dinner, a responsibility that Luke had taken on due to his mother being a single parent with a full-time job. Despite her unwavering insistence on his innocence, the police viewed her as a potential accomplice, which led to her being arrested and charged with providing a false alibi and perversion of justice. This development added significant tension to the case, as the authorities seemed determined to undermine Luke's defense. However, 8 months later, after Luke had already been convicted, all charges against his mother were dropped, highlighting the flaws in the prosecution's case and raising serious questions about the integrity of the investigation. A major criticism of the investigation is that it largely ignored other potential suspects who could have had motives or opportunities to commit the crime. Several individuals who either had a history of violence or were seen near the crime scene around the time of the murder were not thoroughly investigated. Luke Mitchell bore a striking physical resemblance to another local boy, Mark Kane, who lived closer to the crime scene. Both teenagers had similar hairstyles, hair colours and clothing styles, which made it easy for witnesses to confuse the two. Mark's residence was just a short distance from where Jodi was found, and a closed-off field provided a perfect, unseen escape route to and from the crime scene. The day after Jodi's murder, Mark visited a friend and was observed with 3 noticeable scratches on his face. He claimed he had been heavily using drugs, including methadone, Valium, smoking weed and drinking lager, in the woods around the same time Jodi was killed. Mark was also known to always carry a knife with him, which could explain many of the injuries Jodi sustained in the attack. When his friend noticed the scratches and expressed suspicion, Mark said that he fell into a bush. However, his friend didn't believe him. When pressed further, Mark became visibly upset and abruptly left the flat, raising red flags about his potential involvement in Jodi's death. According to Mark Kane's mother, Norma, during the investigation, police ran his fingerprints and DNA against what was found at the crime scene, and there was no match. She recalled a policewoman telling her not to worry, explaining that they were only investigating Mark due to claims made by one of his friends. The officer assured her they already had the right person in custody. Norma claimed that Mark's friend, Scott, who made these allegations, had attempted to sell the story for £50,000 and had encouraged Mark to go along with it, promising to split the money. Mark Kane tragically died in 2018 before the release of the documentary A Murder in a Small Town, which named him as a potential person of interest in the case. In the documentary, Scott concluded an interview by stating he remembered seeing Mark the day after Jodi's murder, which Norma believes was a fabricated story created for financial gain. During the investigation into Jodi Jones's murder, a critical finding emerged when the DNA of Stephen Kelly, Jodi's sister's boyfriend, was discovered on Jodi's shirt around a bloodstain on her breast. This discovery raised alarm bells as it indicated a potential connection between Kelly and the crime scene. In response to this unsettling evidence, the police offered an explanation suggesting that Jodi had been wearing her sister's shirt at the time of the murder, which would account for the presence of Kelly's DNA. However, this explanation was met with skepticism by many, as it seemed highly improbable that any DNA would remain intact after being washed in a washing machine. Typically, DNA evidence from previous wear would be effectively washed away, raising serious concerns about the reliability of the police's assertion. This revelation not only cast doubt on the police's narrative, but also pointed to the possibility of other scenarios involving Stephen Kelly that had not been thoroughly investigated, such as the nature of his relationship with Jodi and his whereabouts at the time of her murder. The oversight in exploring these critical leads further complicated the narrative surrounding Jodi's tragic death and highlighted the shortcomings in the police focus on Luke Mitchell as the sole suspect, suggesting that vital evidence may have been overlooked in the rush to build a case against him. Witnesses reported seeing two boys riding a homemade moped around the area where Jodi Jones was found, raising concerns about their possible involvement in her murder. The moped was observed leaning against the V in the wall near the crime scene around the time of Jodi's death, but the boys were nowhere to be seen. It took 5 days after Jodi's murder for the boys to come forward to the police, and it was later revealed that one of them was Jodi's cousin. Alarmingly, the day after Jodi's death, the other boy, who was not related to her, cut his hair with scissors in what appeared to be an attempt to change his appearance. When they were questioned in court about their whereabouts at the time of the incident, their answers were vague and unconvincing, with both boys repeatedly responding, "I don't know," or "I don't remember." This lack of clarity and the suspicious timing of their actions raised serious doubts about their credibility and highlighted the failure of investigators to thoroughly explore all possible leads related to the case. When Jodi Jones was discovered, a used condom was found near her body containing fresh semen. This finding added another layer of complexity to the investigation, raising concerns and questions about the circumstances surrounding her murder. However, the DNA from the semen was not identified until nearly 3 years later, when it was finally run through the national database as part of an investigation into an unrelated sexual violence case. The investigation's failure to thoroughly explore these alternative leads raises significant concerns about its objectivity. The police's early decision to focus on Mitchell seemed to have created a form of confirmation bias, where evidence was interpreted in a way that reinforced their belief in his guilt, while potentially exculpatory evidence was overlooked or ignored. The media's portrayal of Mitchell as a disturbed young man obsessed with dark and violent imagery also likely influenced public perception and, by extension, the jury's verdict. This narrative may have overshadowed the fact that other individuals with far more concerning backgrounds and possible motives were not fully investigated. The forensic handling of evidence in this case has also come under fire. The defense argued that proper procedures were not followed, leading to potential contamination of crucial evidence. This, combined with the narrow focus on Mitchell, has led many to question whether the investigation was conducted with the thoroughness and impartiality required for such a serious crime. Given the circumstantial nature of the evidence against Luke Mitchell, the potential for a wrongful conviction is significant. The Sunday Daily in Scotland offered a lie detector test to Luke Mitchell's mother, who passed with flying colours, reinforcing her claims of her son's innocence.
Regarding whether you lied to give Luke an alibi or not, do you intend to answer all of the questions truthfully?
Yeah.
Did you burn any clothing or evidence that would incriminate Luke of Jodi's death?
No.
Did you lie in your court testimony during Luke's trial?
No.
Did you falsify Luke's alibi regarding his whereabouts on the day of Jodi's death?
No.
This development garnered significant media attention and provided a glimmer of hope for Luke's defense. Following this, Luke himself took a lie detector test while in jail, where he also passed.
Regarding the death of Jodi, do you intend to answer all of the questions truthfully?
Yes.
Prior to Jodi going missing, do you remember deliberately lying to a police officer?
No.
Prior to Jodi going missing, do you remember going out of your way to physically hurt someone?
No.
Did you know for certain where Jodi's body would be found?
No.
Do you remember ever going out of your way to take revenge on someone?
No.
Were you present when Jodi was stabbed?
No.
Further supporting his assertions of being at home during the time of Jodi's murder. The results of both tests raised questions about the validity of the evidence used against him and suggested that the investigation may have overlooked crucial details in the rush to convict him. The successful outcomes of these lie detector tests highlighted the growing doubts surrounding the police's case and the intense scrutiny that Luke and his family faced throughout the ordeal. The Jodi Jones case and the conviction of Luke Mitchell raised profound questions about the criminal justice system's ability to ensure fair and thorough investigations. While Jodi's murder was a tragedy that devastated her family and community, the conviction of Luke Mitchell, considering the evidence and investigative shortcomings, remains deeply controversial. The case highlights the need for police to explore all potential leads without bias and to avoid the dangers of focusing too narrowly on a single suspect. Without conclusive evidence and with credible alternative suspects not fully investigated, the possibility of Luke Mitchell's wrongful conviction cannot be dismissed, leaving a lingering question about whether justice was truly served. For the past 20 years, Luke Mitchell has steadfastly maintained his innocence in the murder of Jodi Jones, consistently asserting that he was not involved in the crime.
They've taken everything from me. My friends, my family, my home, my childhood, my adolescence, my early adult years, but they will not bully a false admission of guilt out of me. As long as I can get up every morning and look myself in the mirror and hold my head up high, I'll get through this.
Throughout his legal battles, it was revealed that his human rights had been violated by the police during what were supposed to be interviews but turned into intense interrogations, further complicating his case. Despite the emerging evidence pointing to his wrongful conviction and the acknowledgement of these serious violations, Luke remains incarcerated today. His continued imprisonment not only highlights the flaws in the judicial process, but also underscores the challenges faced by individuals seeking justice in a system that has already failed them. Luke's unwavering stance on his innocence serves as a powerful reminder of the ongoing fight against wrongful convictions and the need for reform within the legal system.
If it was put to me that I would almost be guaranteed release and parole if all I did was admit guilt, absolutely not. I would not do that. I will not admit to something I've not done. I will maintain my innocence, and if that means that I stay in closed conditions for the rest of my life if need be, then that's what will happen.
That is all for the Jodi Jones and Luke Mitchell case. Don't forget to subscribe so you're notified on my next true crime case, and like the video if you really did like the video. Also comment down below your opinions on this case, along with any others you would like me to look into. It could be my next one.